Welcome, and thank you for joining me, mere mortals. Today we will be diving into the deep realm of the Grimm Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm. I'm going to be reading some of these. I absolutely love the Brothers Grimm, and hopefully you will enjoy these as well. A lot of them are very, very short. Some of them end kind of abruptly for my taste, but it's so much fun to look at these old fairy tales. They aren't the La version that we're used to. Yeah, is Rapunzel in there? For sure. Frog Prince? You got it. Beauty and the Beast? You bet. But are they the nice version? No. They're the originals. They have secrets, they have morals, and they have lessons for us, as well as some pretty tragic and dark endings. So, just so you all know, this is going to be a series. I'm going to be doing two versions of this. I'm going to be reading the book and the stories as they come out of the book, word for word. And then, after that, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a, I guess, Reader Digest version where I just give you a rundown in my words of what the story is. So you can look for both of those. I highly suggest keeping children away from the Reader Digest version because I will probably use my own colorful language on some parts. And as far as the original stories go, some of them, depending on the story, you might let a child listen to, but a lot of them, like I said, are dark because they are the original. So go ahead, and parents out there, you go ahead and listen and watch first before you make the decision to hear a kid. Just sit down and absorb all of this information, because at the end of the day, you got to make that choice for yourself if they're adult enough to listen to what goes on in the real, non-Disney version of fairy tales. The fourth story in our book today is going to be The Frog King, or Iorn Henry. In old times, when wishing still helped one, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful, but the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, which has seen so much, was astonished whenever it shone on her face. Close by the king's castle lay a great dark forest, and under an old lime tree in the forest was a well. And when the day was very warm, the king's child went out into the forest and sat down by the side of the cool fountain. And when she was bored, she took out a golden ball and threw it up on high and caught it. This ball was her favorite plaything. Now it so happened that on one occasion the princess's golden ball did not fall into the little hand which was holding up for it, but onto the ground. It began to roll straight into the water. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes, but it vanished, and the well was deep, so deep that the bottom could not ever be seen. At this she began to cry, and cry louder and louder. She could not be comforted. And as she thus lamented, someone said to her, "What ails you, king's daughter? Your tears would melt the heart of stone." She looked around from side to side to see where the voice came from, and saw a frog stretching its thick, ugly head from the water. "Ah! Old water splasher, is it you?" she said. "I am weeping for my golden ball which has fallen into the well." "Be quiet and do not weep," said the frog. "I can help you, but what will you give me if I bring this plaything up again?" "Whatever you will have, dear frog, my clothes, my pearls, my jewels, and even the golden crown which I am wearing." The frog answered, "I do not care about your clothes, your pearls, your jewels, or your golden crown. But if you will love me and let me be your companion and your playmate and sit by your little table and eat off your little golden plate and drink out of your little golden cup and sleep in your little bed, if you will promise me this, I will go down below and bring up your golden ball again." "Oh yes," she said, "I promise you all that you wish, if you will but bring me back my ball again." She, however, thought, "How silly Frog does talk. He lives in the water with the other frogs, croaks, and can be no companion to a human being." But the frog, when he had received his promise, put his head in the water and sank down. In a short while he came swimming up again, with the ball in his mouth, and threw it up onto the grass. The king's daughter was delighted to see her pretty plaything once more. She picked it up and ran away with it. "Wait, wait," said the frog. "Take me with you. I can't run as you can." But what did it avail him to scream, "Croak, croak, croak," after her as loudly as he could? She did not listen to it, but ran home, soon forgotten the poor frog, who was forced to go back down into his well again. The next day, when she had seated herself at the table with the king and all the courtiers, and was eating from her little golden plate, something came creeping splish, 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 splish up the marble staircase. And when it got up to the top, it knocked on the door and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me." She ran to see who was outside, but when she opened the door, there sat the frog in front of it. And she slammed the door in great haste and sat down at her dinner again, and was quite frightened. The king saw plainly that her heart was beating violently, and said, "My child, what are you so afraid of? Is there perchance a giant outside who will carry you away?" "Ah, no," she replied, "it is no giant, but a disgusting frog." "What does the frog want with you?" "Ah, dear father, yesterday I was in the forest, sitting by the well, playing with my golden ball, and it fell into the water, and because I cried so, the frog brought it out for me. But because he so insisted, I promised him he could be my companion, but I never thought he'd be able to come out of his water, and now he's outside there, and he wants to come into me." In the meantime, it knocked a second time, and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me. Do you not know what you said to me yesterday by the cool water of the fountain? Princess, youngest princess." Then the king said, "That which you have promised you must perform. Go and let him in." She went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in and followed her, step by step, to her chair. He sat and cried, "Lift me up by you." She delayed until the king at last commanded her to do it. When the frog was at once into the chair, he wanted to be on the table. And when he was so on the table, he said, "Now push your little golden plate near me, so that we may eat together." She did this, but it was easy to see that she did not do so willingly. The frog enjoyed what he ate, but almost every mouthful she took choked her, and at length he said, "I have eaten, I am satisfied now, and I am tired. Carry me to your little room, and make your little silken bed ready, and we will both lie down and go to sleep." The king's daughter began to cry, for she was afraid of the cold frog, which she did not like to touch. And when he was now to sleep in her pretty little clean bed, but the king grew angry and said, "He who helped you when you were in trouble ought not to be despised by you afterwards." So she took hold of the frog with 2 fingers and carried him upstairs and put him in the corner. But when she was in bed, he crept to her and said, "I am tired. I want to sleep as well as you. Lift me up or I will tell your father." Then she was terribly angry and took him up and threw him with all her might against the wall. "Now be quiet, odious frog," she said. But when he fell, he was no longer a frog, but a king's son with beautiful kind eyes, and it came to pass that with her father's consent he became her companion and husband. He told her how he became bewitched by a wicked witch, and how no one could have delivered him from this evil but herself, and that tomorrow they would go together to his kingdom. When they went to sleep, the next morning the sun awoke them. A carriage came driving up with 8 white horses. Each had a white ostrich feather stuck to their head, and were harnessed with gold chains. Behind stood the youngest king's servant, Faithful Henry. Faithful Henry had been so unhappy when his master was changed into a frog, that he had caused 3 iron bands to be laid around his heart, lest it burst with grief and sadness. The carriage was to conduct the young king into his kingdom. Faithful Henry helped both of them in, placed himself behind again, and was full of joy because of his deliverance. And when they had driven part of the way, the king's son had heard cracking from behind him as if something had broken. So he had turned around and cried, "Henry, the carriage is breaking." "No, master, it is not the carriage. It is the bands from my heart, which was put there in great pain, which you were a frog and imprisoned in as well." Again and once again, while they were on their way, something cracked. And each time the king's son thought the carriage was breaking, but it was only the bands which were springing from the heart of Faithful Henry, because his master was free and happy. And that is the end of that story. Is that how you thought the Frog Prince went?